Imagine being framed for a crime you did not commit. Sit with that for a moment. You are going about your day. A normal day, nothing unusual. And then the police arrive. They walk into your office, or they pull you over on the road, or they appear at your door. They say they have evidence. Evidence that you did the thing you absolutely did not do. They walk you over to your car, or your bag, or your apartment. They reach inside, and they pull out something that does not belong to you. Something valuable, something stolen, something that puts you in at the scene of a crime when you were never there. You cannot explain it. You did not put it there. And every word you say in your defense sounds worse than the silence before it. The walls close in. The handcuffs go on. The lawyer shrugs. The prosecutor smirks. The headline writes itself. Now consider a different question. What if getting caught with the item that did not belong to you was the very thing that saved you from being guilty? What if the so-called crime, the thing they caught you with, was the only thing standing between you and a crime you actually did commit? Picture it this way. You did something a long time ago, a real thing, something nobody knows about, something that, if it ever surfaced, would destroy you. And it is about to surface. Somebody is about to find out. And the only way to keep you safe, the only way, is for someone in power to plant something on you, to pull you in, to hold you in custody, while the other thing, the real thing, the buried thing, the old crime that was about to bury you forever, gets quietly erased. The frame is not to convict you. The frame is to clear you. That paradox, the planted evidence that clears instead of convicts, the frame that turns out to be a rescue, is not a thought experiment. It is a real case, sitting in plain sight. In a chapter, most readers walk past without ever seeing what it is. The case is thousands of years old, but the truth it has been quietly carrying through every century, every empire, every generation that thumbed past it without recognizing what it was, is one of the most important truths any human being can hear, including you. Today, not in an abstract way, but in a way that the moment you see it, changes how you walk into every room from here forward. The dust on the box is part of the disguise. The case looks ancient. The truth it carries is breaking news. Today, we open the file. Welcome to Cracked Wide Open, where Bible mysteries aren't just explained, they're investigated like cold cases. Each episode, we analyze the sermons of Pastor Ivor Myers, reopening the text, following the clues, and uncover truths that have been hiding in plain sight. Before we open the file, we have to talk about the way the file looks when you first see it. There is a kind of picture, popular years ago, mostly forgotten now, called a magic eye. From a distance, it looks like nothing. A wall of zigzag lines, random color patterns, visual noise. You stare at it, and your eyes refuse to focus on anything meaningful. But if you do the trick, if you let your gaze relax, if you stop trying to see the surface and let the surface dissolve, a hidden three-dimensional image rises up out of the chaos. A dolphin, a castle, a dragon. Something that was always there, but invisible to the eye that was searching too narrowly. That is the Bible. That is what so much of Scripture looks like to the eye that has not yet learned how to look. A wall of stories, a jumble of names, a confusing series of family dramas, prophetic threats, and ancient genealogies. Zigzag lines, but beneath the surface of every story, beneath the surface of the parables, the genealogies, the strange decisions and stranger silences, there is a hidden, three-dimensional image, a pattern, a face, a person. And when the eye finally relaxes and the depth opens up, the entire Bible turns into something else. Pastor Myers has done this for years. He walks into the room of a story everyone thinks they already know, and he says, "Wait, look again. Let your eye relax. There is a 3D image hiding in this passage, and when you see it, you will not be able to unsee it." Today is one of those passages. Today we are going into the file of a man named Joseph, a man whose story, on the surface, is a sweeping family saga of betrayal and reconciliation. Sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused, imprisoned, eventually elevated to the second most powerful position in the Empire of Egypt, and eventually reunited with the very brothers who had sold him. That is the surface. That is the wall of zigzag lines. But underneath the story, woven into the architecture of every scene, is a hidden picture. And the hidden picture is the gospel itself. Not the gospel preached in a footnote, but the gospel embedded into the bones of the narrative. A picture of grace, of imputed righteousness, of a savior who refuses to be transactional, of a brother who would rather plant his own treasure on you than sell it to you. And once you see it, every scene, every strange behavior, every odd silence, every apparently arbitrary command Joseph gives clicks into place. The frame becomes the rescue. The cup in the sack becomes the gospel. The case begins in Genesis chapter 37. Joseph is 17 years old, the favored son of his father Jacob, the youngest of a swarm of older brothers who have already grown to resent him. And one night, Joseph has a dream. In the dream, he and his brothers are binding sheaves of wheat in a field. Joseph's sheaf rises and stands upright, and the sheaves of his brothers gather around it and bow down. He tells the brothers they hate him for it. He has another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars bow down to him. He tells the brothers and his father. Even his father is unsettled by the strangeness of the vision. Nobody understands what Joseph is saying. Even Joseph does not fully understand what Joseph is saying. The dreams look like zigzag lines, disconnected, inflated, childish. The brothers see only arrogance. The father sees only confusion. And Joseph himself sees only that the dreams came from somewhere outside himself, and they will not let him alone. And then the brothers act. Jacob sends Joseph out one day to check on the brothers in the field. They see him coming. They see the coat, the famous coat, the one their father gave him that always reminded everybody he was the favorite. And right there in the field, they decide. They are going to kill him. Reuben talks them down to throwing him in a pit instead. Then a caravan rolls by. And Judah of all people, the one who later, Judah says, "Why don't we just sell him? Make some money, 20 pieces of silver." They sell their own brother into slavery. They strip him. They throw him in the pit. The text says they sit down and eat lunch while he is in the pit crying for his life. Then they pull him up, hand him over to the traffickers, dip his coat in goat's blood, take it home to their father, and tell him a wild beast must have devoured him. They lie to their father. They watch him grieve. They watch him fall apart. And they carry that lie for 20 years. Mark that. Mark it carefully. That is the real crime. That is the buried thing. That is the old crime from the cold open. The one nobody knows about. The one that is about to catch up with them. The one that would bury them forever if it ever surfaced. The brothers do not know it is about to catch up. They have buried it so deep, they almost do not carry it anymore. Almost. And meanwhile, the dreams disappear into the dust of a slave road. Years pass. Joseph rises. Joseph falls. Joseph rises again. Slave to steward. Steward to prisoner. Prisoner to the right hand of Pharaoh. Through every reversal, the dreams stay buried in his back pocket, dormant, waiting. until the famine. Genesis 41, verse 54. The 7 years of famine arrive, just as Joseph had predicted. The famine is in all lands, but in Egypt, because Joseph had organized the storehouses, there is bread. And when the famine becomes severe, the world comes to Egypt to buy. And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all lands. Hold that phrase, buy corn, buy bread, because that phrase is going to do enormous work in this case. Up in the land of Canaan, an old man named Jacob hears that there is corn in Egypt, and he tells his sons, "Get up, go down, buy us food, that we may live and not die." And 10 of Joseph's brothers, the same 10 who had stripped him, thrown him in a pit, and sold him into slavery, saddle their donkeys and head south with money to buy. They have come to Egypt to perform a transaction. That is the most important sentence in the early part of this case. They have come to perform a transaction. They have come to hand over silver, receive bread, load the donkeys, and leave. That was the plan. But Joseph has a different plan. Genesis 42, verse 7. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food. To buy food. That is the second time the text emphasizes it. They have come to buy. They have come to make a deal. They have come to be customers. They have come to complete the transaction and disappear. And Joseph, without revealing himself, looks across the courtroom of his own throne room and accuses them of something they did not come for. He accuses them of being spies. Spies who have come to scout the land. It sounds like an accusation. It sounds harsh. It sounds like a man punishing the brothers who once betrayed him. But there is something hiding under the accusation. Look at what Joseph actually says. To see the nakedness of the land are ye come. He is accusing them of coming to see the land, to examine it, to consider it, as if they intended to settle there. And here is the secret being whispered into the case file. That is exactly what Joseph wants them to do. He wants them to see the land, to consider the land, to eventually settle in the land. He has spent years preparing a place for them, and they have come down expecting only to grab some bread and leave. Joseph does not want them to leave. Joseph wants them to stay. That is the foundation of every strange thing that happens for the next 4 chapters of Genesis. Every accusation, every interrogation, every test, every detour, every planted item. It is all driven by one single fact about the heart of Joseph. He does not want them to leave. He wants them home. But the brothers do not know it is him. They are standing in front of the brother they sold, the brother they betrayed, the brother whose blood they faked. And after 20 years, after Egyptian dress and Egyptian language and an Egyptian throne, they do not recognize him. And then comes a moment that has to be marked. Genesis 42, verse 21. The brothers, accused of being spies, turn to each other in the throne room, and they say, We are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. They are confessing the old crime, right there, in the throne room, to each other. 20 years later, the thing they had buried, they bring it up, because they assume that whatever is happening to them now is God catching up to them for what they did to Joseph. The cold open is happening. The buried thing is surfacing. The old crime is about to bury them. And Joseph is right there. The text says, he turned away and wept. That is the first of many tears in this chapter. And those tears are worth tracking, because they tell you everything you need to know about the heart that is framing them. Joseph weeps when he hears the confession. He weeps when he sees Benjamin for the first time, And the text says he leaves the room and washes his face before he comes back. He weeps when Judah offers himself in Benjamin's place. He weeps when he reveals himself, so loudly the Egyptians hear it through the walls. He weeps when his father arrives in Egypt. He weeps after his father dies, when the brothers, still afraid, come to him fearing payback, and the brothers see none of it. From the outside, throughout the chapter, they see only the rough voice, the accusations, the cup, the chase. They never see the tears, because the tears happen on the other side of the door, behind the chamber wall. In the moments, Joseph turns away. That is the heart that is framing them. That is the heart that is setting the table. That is the heart that is preparing the rooms. That is the father. Joseph throws them in prison, not all of them, not forever, just for 3 days. 3 days, stop and let that number sit in the file. 3 days is not an arbitrary number in Scripture. 3 days is the duration of the most important silence in the entire Bible. 3 days in the ground between the cross and the empty tomb. 3 days that reset the architecture of the universe. Mark 8, verse 31. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected of the elders and of the chief priests and scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. 3 days. When Joseph commands the brothers into the ward for 3 days, the prophetic clock is already ticking under the floor. And on the third day, exactly on the third day, Joseph emerges from his chambers, opens the doors of the prison, and speaks to them. This do and live, for I fear God. Live. The third day brings life. The third day brings release. The third day, in the architecture of grace, is always the day the captives walk out of the cell. He sends them home with corn. He keeps one brother behind as collateral, and he tells them to come back with the youngest, Benjamin. But before they leave, Joseph does something extraordinary, something that the text takes pains to highlight. He commands his steward, fill their sacks with corn, give them provision for the journey, and put every man's money back in his sack. Put the money back, the money they came to buy with, give it back to them. The very payment they brought to perform the transaction, return it. This is the first piece of planted evidence. Not evidence of guilt, evidence of grace. The brothers leave. They mount their donkeys. They head north. And somewhere along the road, at an inn, one of them opens a sack to feed his donkey. And there, sitting on top of the corn, is the bag of silver he had handed to the steward only days before. His own money, returned, tucked secretly into his sack. His heart fails him. He calls to his brothers. They look in their own sacks and find the same. The text says, their heart failed them, and they were afraid, saying one to another, what is this that God hath done unto us? Consider the question, what is this that God hath done unto us? That is the right question, but it is asked in the wrong tone. They ask it as a cry of terror. They ask it because they are convinced they have just been framed. They ask it because they assume the powerful Egyptian behind them is now going to charge them with theft, hunt them down, and connect it back to the old guilt they already think God is finally surfacing. In their minds, the silver in the sack is the noose tightening. The silver is the evidence. The silver is the rope. They cannot conceive that the silver is a gift. They cannot conceive that the man who gave it back is their long-lost brother. They cannot conceive that the planted evidence is not condemnation, but love. This is the gospel pattern, repeated centuries before the cross was ever raised. Listen to Revelation chapter 3, verse 18. The risen Christ, speaking to the church at Laodicea. I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayest be rich, and white raiment, that thou mayest be clothed, Buy of me, it sounds like a transaction. It sounds like commerce. But Isaiah 55, verse 1, decodes it. Ho, everyone that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, and he that hath no money, come ye, buy and eat. Yea, come, buy wine and milk, without money and without price. Without money, without price. The buying of the gospel is not a purchase. It is the surrender of a customer trying to make a deal, and the discovery that the merchant has no intention of selling. He has only ever intended to give. The brothers came to buy. Joseph refused to sell. He sold to the Egyptians. He sold to the foreigners. He sold to the customers who came as customers. But to his own, to his family, he would not let the silver change hands. He gave the bread, kept the silver, and slipped it back into the sack, as if to say, "Your money will not buy this from me. You are my brothers. I am not running a store. I am running a rescue." This is the foundation of every gospel passage on grace. By grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. The brothers brought their money. The father returned it, because the father is not a merchant. He is our Father who has been planning the homecoming for years. There is a warning hiding in this scene that the church has needed for centuries. Many believers, sincere, devoted, well-meaning believers, approach God exactly the way Joseph's brothers approached Egypt, with money in hand, with a transaction in mind, with a plan to perform the deal and leave. They calculate that if they dress a certain way, speak a certain way, behave a certain way, attend the right services, give the right amount, hold the right opinions, then God will accept them. They make a list of inputs and expect a corresponding output. They walk up to the throne of grace with silver in their fist, prepared to pay, and every time they do, the Father quietly puts the silver back in the sack, because he is not a merchant, and the relationship was never transactional. This is what makes the misunderstanding so dangerous. It is possible to walk through the entire arc of a religious life, to keep the rules, to attend the services, to wear the right clothes, to give the right offerings, and to miss completely the heart of the one you are trying to please. It is possible to bring the silver to church every week for 50 years and never realize that the Father has been quietly slipping it back into your sack every single week. He is not paid by your performance. He is not impressed by your inputs. He is not running a store. And the moment you grasp this, the moment the silver in the sack is recognized for what it is, the entire architecture of your relationship with God collapses and rebuilds itself on a different foundation. Not transaction, reception. Not performance, presence. Not customer, family. Pastor Myers said it bluntly, there is nothing we can do to earn what Jesus desires to give us. Nothing. He returns it every time because his love was never for sale. But there is a detail that the surface reader misses. Joseph did not give them enough bread for a year. He did not give them enough bread for months. He gave them enough to get back to Canaan, and a little more. Not too much, not too little, just enough that the famine would eventually exhaust the supply, and the brothers would have to come back. This is not coincidence, this is design. Listen to Matthew 6, verse 11. Give us this day our daily bread. Daily. Not weekly, not monthly, not annually, daily. The Father did not stock our pantry with a lifetime supply. He gave us what we need for today and made tomorrow contingent on coming back to him for more. Why? Because he does not want a transaction. He wants a relationship. He does not want us walking away with a bulk shipment, never to return. He wants us back. Tomorrow, the next day after that. Forever. The famine in Canaan was not just a historical event. It was a theological mechanism. The famine forced the brothers to come back. The famine refused to let them stay home in their old life of betrayal and bitterness. The famine drove them, again and again, into the presence of the brother they had wronged, until eventually the encounters did the work that distance never could have done. There is a famine in your life too. Every emptied sack, every depleted strength, every moment when the supply runs out and you find yourself once again with no choice but to set out for the place where the bread is. That famine is not your enemy. It is the same brother who refuses to let you leave him. He gave you just enough to make you come back. Sure enough, the bread runs out. The brothers stand around in Canaan, looking at empty sacks, and Jacob sends them back. But this time, they go armed, not with weapons, with double money. Take double money in your hand, and the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks, carry it again in your hand. Peradventure, it was an oversight. It was an oversight. That is what they have decided. That is the explanation they have constructed for the silver they found in their sacks. Because the alternative, that a powerful Egyptian would deliberately give back the payment of a foreign customer, is impossible to their imagination. So they file it under clerical error and move on. And they bring more money, because more money in their minds will repair the irregularity. More money will close the loop. More money will make the transaction whole. This is the most relatable scene in the entire chapter. This is exactly what we do. When grace shows up unexpectedly in our lives, a forgiveness we did not expect, a deliverance we did not earn, a blessing that arrived without invoice, our first instinct is to file it as oversight, to assume the books will eventually be reconciled, to bring more money the next time, just in case the Father remembers what we owe. We cannot believe the gift was a gift. We cannot believe the silver in the sack was deliberate. So we double down on the transaction. And the Father, patient as always, lets us bring the double money. He listens to us explain. He hears us say, surely there has been a mistake. Surely we did not actually deserve what was given. Surely we owe. And his steward, in the case of Joseph, an actual steward, in our case, the still small voice of the Spirit, answers them with words that should be carved over every altar in every church. Peace be to you, fear not. Your God and the God of your father hath given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. I had your money. I have everything I need. What I gave you was not a mistake. What I returned to you was not an oversight. It was deliberate. It was love. It was the Father slipping treasure into your sack while you were too busy counting your silver to notice. Joseph sees Benjamin, his full brother, the youngest, the one who shared his mother's womb. And something breaks open in Joseph that has been sealed for 2 decades. Bring these men home and slay and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon. He brings them to his house, not a courtroom, not a prison, not a marketplace, his house, the most intimate room in the most powerful palace, in the most powerful nation on earth. He brings them home. But the brothers, when they realize they are being escorted into Joseph's residence, panic, and the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, because of the money that was returned in our sacks at the first time, are we brought in, that he may seek occasion against us and fall upon us, and take us for bondmen, and our asses. They are convinced they are being walked into a trap. They are convinced the silver in their sacks was a setup. They are convinced the powerful Egyptian is finally about to drop the gavel and enslave them. And remember, under the silver is the older fear, the brother they sold, the blood-soaked coat, the lie they told their father. They are walking into Joseph's house convinced today is the day all of it comes due. The cold open is closing in. The old crime is about to surface and bury them. And Joseph is at that very moment trying to bring them home. Listen to John 14, verse 1. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you. Joseph went ahead of his brothers. He was sold into Egypt before they ever arrived. He was placed in the palace before they ever conceived of the journey. And every moment of every year that he spent in that palace was a moment of preparing the rooms his brothers would one day enter. He prepared a place for them, and when they finally walked into that place, they did not recognize it as preparation. They recognized it as a trap. That is the human heart. That is exactly how millions of believers experience the kindness of God. The Father has been preparing a place for them, preparing rooms, setting tables, arranging the meal, and when they finally cross the threshold of His goodness, they shrink back in fear, certain they are about to be charged for the silver they did not pay for. We obey the Father out of fear. We approach the Father expecting accusation. We walk into the Father's house and brace for impact. And the Father, watching the panic in our eyes, withdraws to weep, exactly as Joseph wept, because the people he loves cannot tell the difference between a trap and a homecoming. They eat. They are seated in birth order, a detail that should have shattered them, because no Egyptian could have known the order of their births, but they miss the clue. Benjamin gets 5 times the portion of the others. They drink. They are merry. And then it is morning. The sacks are filled again. The silver is returned again. And this time, Joseph adds something else to one of the sacks, and put my cup, the silver cup, in the sack's mouth of the youngest, and his corn money, his own cup, his silver cup, his most personal possession, the cup from which he drank, the cup that sat in his palace, the cup that bore the imprint of his hand, the cup that was unmistakably, irreversibly, undeniably his. He plants it in Benjamin's sack, and then he sends his steward to chase them down and accuse them of stealing it. This is the second piece of planted evidence. And again, it is not evidence of guilt. It is the gospel. Now go all the way back to the cold open. The frame is not to convict. The frame is to clear. The brothers had a real crime in their record. The thing they did to Joseph. They had no defense for it. No payment that could undo it. No ledger entry that could balance it out. So Joseph plants something on them, something they did not earn, something that does not belong to them, something that bears his name. And the moment that something is found in their possession, they have to come back to him, because they have something that belongs to him. And once you have something that belongs to him, you are not running, you are not negotiating, you are not buying your way out. You are coming home because what you carry is not yours. And while they are being brought back, the old crime gets covered. That is what the cold open was about. The frame of the silver cup is not there to add a new crime to their record. It is there to bring them into a room where the old crime can finally be erased. Listen to Romans 4, verse 5. But to him that worketh not, but believeth on him that justifieth the ungodly, his faith is counted for righteousness. Counted, imputed, reckoned, placed in your account by someone else. Listen to 2 Corinthians 5, verse 21. For he hath made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. Made, the righteousness of God, placed inside us. Not earned, not negotiated, not purchased, placed. By the one who loved us before we ever knew his name. The cup in Benjamin's sack is the righteousness of Christ in your sack. The silver returned the first time was the cancellation of the debt you tried to pay. The cup planted the second time is the imputation of a righteousness you could not have generated, and both of them, together, are the full picture of the gospel that Pastor Myers preached. Free salvation plus imputed righteousness. Nothing of yours brought to the table. Everything of his placed in your sack. The steward catches them, opens the sacks, pulls out the cup. The brothers tear their clothes. The brothers turn around. The brothers come back to the house of Joseph one final time, and they fall before him on the ground. And Judah, the one who once led the conspiracy to sell Joseph into slavery, speaks for the group. What shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God hath found out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also with whom the cup is found. We are your servants. We have nothing to say in our defense. We have no money to pay. We have no righteousness to plead. We have no excuse to offer. The cup was found in our possession, and we accept the consequences. We belong to you now. That is the most beautiful confession in the entire Joseph cycle, because it is the perfect picture of the human response to the gospel. We do not say, I earned the cup. We do not say, I bought the cup. We do not say, I deserve to be in the master's house. We say, the cup was found in our possession, and we cannot explain how it got there. And now we are your servants. That is salvation. But Judah does not stop there. Joseph's response to the confession is, only the one with the cup will be my servant. The rest of you, go. Go home to your father in peace. That is the test. That is the final test. Because the question Joseph has been asking the entire chapter, under every accusation, every interrogation, every planted item, is one question. Are these the same men who sold me? Are they still the kind of men who would walk away from a brother to save themselves? Are they still the kind of men who could face their grieving father with another lost son? Read what Judah does next. Genesis 44, verse 18 and following. Judah steps forward. Judah of all people. The same Judah who 20 years ago said, "What profit is it if we slay our brother? Let us sell him." The architect of the original crime. He steps forward. He recounts the whole story to this Egyptian ruler. He tells him, "Our father will die if we come back without this boy. Our father has already lost one son. His soul is bound up in this child's soul. He cannot lose another." And then he says, "Let me stay. Let me be your bondservant in his place. Let the boy go home with his brothers. I will take the punishment." Judah is offering substitution. The same Judah who once profited off selling his brother into slavery is now offering to be sold into slavery in his brother's place. That is the conversion. That is the spirit Joseph has been hunting for the whole chapter. The men who once betrayed a brother for silver have become men who would surrender themselves rather than let silver come between them and a brother. And that breaks Joseph open. The text says he could not refrain himself any longer. He clears the chamber, every Egyptian out, every steward, every guard, and he weeps so loudly that the whole house hears him through the walls. 20 years of wait, breaking out at once, and the moment Judah offers himself in his brother's place, the moment the brothers finally embody the very thing they once destroyed, Joseph reveals himself. The case cracks wide open. "I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt." He says it plainly. No drum roll, no accusation, no, "You will pay for what you did." Just, "I am Joseph your brother." And then the next thing he asks, verse 3, "I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live?" That is the first thing he asks. After 20 years, doth my father yet live? The brother they sold, after the slavery, after the prison, after the throne, after everything, is still, at the core, the son who loves his father. The throne of Egypt did not change who he was. 20 years did not change who he was. The betrayal did not change who he was. And the brothers cannot even speak. The text says, they were troubled at his presence, terrified, because suddenly the powerful Egyptian in front of them is not a foreign ruler. He is the brother they buried in their conscience, and he is alive. And he is in charge of the bread. The disguise drops. The interrogator was the brother all along. The accuser was the lover all along. The frame was the rescue all along. And the old crime is covered. Listen to what Joseph says next. Verse 5. Now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. He does not even say, you are forgiven. He says, this was the plan. This was always the plan. Your real crime, the one you have been carrying for 20 years, is not just forgiven. It has been folded into a rescue. The same hand that received the cup wrote the pardon for the original crime. That is the cold open completing itself. The frame was real. The cup really was planted. The chase really happened. The brothers really fell on their faces. But it was a frame to clear, not a frame to convict. And the moment they accepted it, the moment Judah said, we are your servants, the old record came off the books, forever. There is one more thing the case file makes clear before the closing. The transactional spirit. The spirit that walks up to the throne with silver in the fist and expects the bread to come back as a fair exchange is the spirit Joseph was working to break in his brothers the entire time. That is the spirit the Father is still working to break in us, because the brothers in their old life were precisely the kind of men who would betray a brother for 20 pieces of silver, who would dip a coat in goat's blood and lie to a grieving father, who would calculate cost and convenience and call it justice. And until that spirit was broken, no amount of family reunion could heal what they had become. The cup in the sack broke the spirit. The silver returned broke the spirit. The 3 days in the ward broke the spirit. And by the time Judah stood up and said, we are your servants, the men who had once been capable of selling their own brother had been remade into men who would die to protect him. That is the work the Father does in us when we let the cup be planted. That is the work that no amount of religious performance can ever accomplish. So here is the picture, when the zigzag lines finally resolve. A man went down into Egypt before his brothers ever conceived of the journey. He suffered there. He was falsely accused. He was imprisoned. He was forgotten. And then he was raised up to the right hand of the throne, where he became the dispenser of bread to a starving world. His brothers came to him in their famine, intending to perform a transaction. He refused to sell. He returned their money. He gave them bread. He sent them home. The famine drove them back. He returned their money again. He gave them more bread. He invited them into his house. He prepared a meal for them. He planted his most personal possession in the bag of the youngest, ensured they would be brought back, and drew them home for good. And when they finally fell on their faces and stopped trying to pay, he revealed himself, and he covered the old crime. Now hear it again, with the disguise dropped. A man went down into our condition before we ever conceived of needing him. He suffered there. He was falsely accused. He was imprisoned by death itself. He was forgotten in the tomb for 3 days. And then he was raised up to the right hand of the throne, where he became the dispenser of bread to a starving world. We came to him in our famine, intending to perform a transaction. He refused to sell. He returned our money. He gave us bread. He sent us home. The famine drove us back. He returned our money again. He gave us more bread. He invited us into his house. He prepared a place for us. He planted his most personal possession, his own righteousness, in our sacks, ensured we would be brought back, and drew us home for good. And when we finally fell on our faces and stopped trying to pay, he revealed himself, and he covered the old crime. The brothers became servants of Joseph by being found with his cup. We become children of God by being found with his righteousness. The frame was the rescue. The planted evidence was the gospel. And here is the reason the enemy of every soul fights so hard to keep this truth out of the church. The truth that the righteousness of Christ is imputed to us, not because of any merit on our part, but as a free gift from God, is the truth that breaks the enemy's grip the moment it is fully received. He knows that. He has always known that, which is why he works overtime to keep the people from seeing the cup in the sack for what it is. His power will be broken if the people receive it fully. If you receive it fully, if the silver in the sack stops being a terror and becomes a gift, if the cup planted in the bag stops being a frame and becomes a rescue, if the homecoming stops being a trap and becomes a father's house, if the transaction is finally surrendered and the relationship is finally received, his power is broken forever. And here is what has to be said to anyone listening who has been carrying their version of the brothers 20 years. Whatever the old crime is, whatever the buried thing is, whatever the lie that has been sitting at the bottom of the sack for years, the thing that cannot be named out loud, the thing that has shaped the way you walk into every room. Listen, the brother you wronged has been on the throne the whole time. He is not waiting for you to balance the ledger. He is not waiting for you to bring enough silver. He is not waiting for you to perform your way back into the room. He has planted the cup, and he has been waiting for you to come back so he can tell you what he told them. Be not grieved. Be not angry with yourselves. This was folded into a rescue before you even understood there was a rescue happening. The case is closed. The brother you wronged has prepared a place for you. The cup is in your sack. You are coming home. And the old crime, the buried thing, the thing you thought would surface and bury you, is covered forever. Folded into a homecoming the brother on the throne planned before you ever knew he was your brother. Go back to the cold open one final time. We started by imagining being framed for a crime we did not commit. The walls closing in, the handcuffs, the headline, the whole nightmare. And we asked, what if the frame was actually clearing us of the real crime, the buried one, the one that was about to bury us forever? That is not a thought experiment. That is the gospel. That is literally what happened to Joseph's brothers. In detail, on the page, in the book of Genesis. And that is what is happening right now to anyone who will receive what has already been planted in the sack. The cup is the frame, and the frame is the rescue, and the old crime is covered. That is the case cracking wide open. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it end here. What we laid out today wasn't meant to be heard once and forgotten. It was meant to be wrestled with. Because the truth is, most people will hear something like this, nod their head, and move on unchanged. But this isn't that kind of message, and this isn't that kind of podcast. There's more to this, and what comes next pushes even further into places that challenge comfort, assumptions, and what many have settled for. So don't just listen and disappear. Follow this podcast so you don't miss what's coming. Until next time, we will see you on the next episode of Cracked Wide Open.